episode 2, Wendy!
Episode 2!
Oh my god, we're ready for
made
episode 2. We did make it over the hurdle of one whole episode.
If we make it
Congratulations.
to 3, it's pattern.
Is that confirmed?
It works with serial killers.
That's correct. You've watched Mindhunter. You've watched Mindhunter. Anyway,
So does that make you serial podcasters?
Yes.
Yes.
Next episode.
Next episode.
Not good.
Okay. Hi, I'm Brittany, and with me is Wendy,
Hello.
and with us is Cricket.
Hi there.
So today we're going to be talking about types of witches, and what better way to not have a witch cast without a witch. So we got a witch. We kidnapped her. She's not here with me.
She's ours now.
She's ours now. So
They stole my broom.
So, Cricket, tell everyone a little bit about your, I don't know what to call it, witch path? Witch path? I don't know what to call it.
Journey.
Journey. Is that
my
what
journey.
it is? Okay.
I would definitely call it a journey.
Okay.
So I've been a practicing witch and pagan since I was about 13. So that's about 12
That's a witchy
years.
number.
It is.
That's a witchy number.
It is.
Oh,
And
she willingly also gave up her age. That means she's not old enough. At this point now, I'm like, should I let people know how old I am? I'm going to wait a little bit longer. I'm willingly tell people.
You know, I made it this far, so I'm just going to be proud that I haven't, managed to screw it up yet.
Right, exactly. Okay, so you've been a witch for 12 years.
12 years, yeah. And I actually started my own dedication and learning and stuff like that on Ostara before I even knew that there were high holidays and stuff associated with the craft.
Oh.
So Ostara is the holiday that's connected with rebirth. It's also the start of spring.
Yeah, and Easter.
And Easter.
Because Christians like to take everything that is pagan and just make it Christian.
Yeah.
Because that's how that happens.
Coming from a Christian background, I've been doing study on my own, and I just went through all the holidays, and it was like, everything is pagan. That I love.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yep. And it's funny when we get to talk into that, and we may talk about this a little bit more later, but it's one of those things where it's like it goes back and forth a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So some things even modern paganism has taken from Christianity, because a lot of us grew up Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So we still have those traditional holidays and things that, we still like to do, so we pull them into our own craft. And,
Right.
And I think that kind of goes back into types of witches and things like that, because just because you're a witch doesn't necessarily mean that you're spiritual.
Oh my god, so that's what I wanted to ask you about. So, I wanted to get it from your perspective, because you are a witch, but you're also what you would call pagan,
Yes.
right? So, are all pagans witches?
No.
Okay, and then are Wiccans witches?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so none of these are exactly... They're not all the same thing. I was just wondering, because I told people that they weren't the same thing, because some people came up to me and they were like, hi, I know that you do tarot readings. Are you a witch, and can you teach me to be a Wiccan? And I was like, just no.
But that's a big thing, even with the definitions. If you're doing study on your own, it's hard to find a good definition because they intercross so much.
Yes,
Absolutely.
they overlap a lot. Yes.
But there is a difference in everything, and I've learned that within the last week, that there are marked differences, but they're so intertwined that it's very hard to get an exact definition on everything.
Okay, well then can you guys tell me what the differences are between witches, Wiccans, and pagans?
Mm-hmm.
All right,
So
just give me your perspectives.
I think the basic one that would be great to start with would be a witch. And a witch is just anyone who practices witchcraft.
Okay.
And there's not a specific right or wrong way to practice witchcraft, in my own opinion. As long as someone is not, hurting themselves or hurting anybody else, I'm pretty much cool with it.
Yeah.
And the craft part is more the physical things that you are doing, what you would do, you would refer to as the magics, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's spiritual witches and then non-spiritual.
But right now,
people.
witchcraft is what she's describing is the physical, what you can do with your hands.
Right.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So it would be, whatever kind of work that you are doing through your craft. So that can be a lot of different things, you know, which is practiced in a lot of different ways. So some people are very much into working with plants and herbs and, you know, creating candles and lotions and things like that. Some people are very much into, you know, using it as a way to, you know, sort of elevate their art. Some people are, you know, very into stones, like myself. You know, I'm very much a rock hound.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's lots of different ways to do it. There's even people who are using technology as a way to, you know, cast spells and things like that.
And
now.
pop culture. We'll get into
culture. I love pop culture witchcraft. I think it's really, really cool.
Really
what I like to think of witchcraft is like, if you took the witch part of it would just be craft.
Yeah.
Everyone loves crafts.
Everyone
Like,
loves
it's
crafts.
It's magic crafts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's like that's how I personalized it in my mind to tell the difference.
Right.
Yeah.
I got that. Okay, so what are Wiccans?
So Wicca, it actually comes from a specific tradition that was started back in the early 1900s by Gerald Gardner. He published the first book on traditional Wicca. So Wicca is a specific belief system in a god and a goddess. And there are lots of traditions and holidays that go with it. There's a specific wheel of the year that you'll see throughout a lot of people's practices. But that traditionally comes from Wicca. And there are certain rituals and things like that, observances of the moon cycles and things like that. It's some of the laws and traditions are a little bit more specific than some would like. So it's very much secular. Like when you think of a big religion, let's say Christianity, I think most people are familiar with that.
Right.
It would be like comparing it to Catholicism.
Okay.
So, you know, let's say paganism is, you know, this big overarching umbrella. Wicca would fall under that umbrella, but it's not necessarily meaning that someone necessarily practices witchcraft, calls themselves a witch, or whatever. But it is a pagan, nature-based religion.
Okay. Interesting.
And so then a pagan is?
So a pagan is a more nature-based spirituality. A lot of times they still observe the 8, you know, traditional holidays that do come from Wicca. I feel like a lot of people who now call themselves pagans traditionally did start with a foundation in Wicca.
Okay.
I know, at least for my own personal experience, that I did. Now, this may not necessarily be the case for everybody, but I know that, you know, with my own personal practice, it's really about this reverence for nature and really gaining that spiritual connection to whatever it is that person believes is out there through working with plants and just observing the beauty of, you know, the landscape or the animals or what have you.
Yeah.
I think the beautiful thing about paganism and Wicca is how much they teach that you create whatever works for you.
Yeah.
And coming from a religion that was so rule-based, like Protestant Christianity, I was a Baptist, so it was like not as like strict ritualistic as Catholicism, but still so many rules you had to follow. You had to be a certain way. There was a picture-perfect person that you were supposed to be for your God. And what I found so far in working with paganism is it's just so open and it's so all about you, and it's not about limiting yourself and, you know, doing sacrifices in yourself to be something that is idealistic that someone else wants you to be, but it's more finding what works for you. And it's just been very peaceful for me learning that so far, and it's just really cool.
I 100% agree. I think that's one of the things that really drew me to call myself pagan more than Wiccan, because I was allowed to sort of disagree with things that I didn't necessarily like within Wicca itself or within traditional religion. It's really about a religion of self-discovery. And it's really about becoming the best version of yourself.
Right.
And it's all self-guided, self-taught. And I think that's really one of the coolest, most unique things about it, because it's very individualized for each person.
Yeah.
You
that's
start
really
tuning
cool.
into yourself, and like you're learning so much more about yourself, and having
There's a lot of
confidence in
self-examination.
yourself.
Yeah.
That's like what it's all about, is self-examination, because like, you know, on a level, you create your own reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you're learning and stuff and taking things into your reality, instead of having, you know, this big huge book that's, you know, universal throughout everything that you're doing, that you have to abide by all of these laws, even though you don't agree with them, even though they're not up to, you know, our society's what needs now. It's very different, very old religions. Paganism and Wicca, I feel it's like super evolving, it's growing, it's very alive.
Yeah.
And I think that's really very interesting.
So, how many types of pagans do you think there are?
Oh, I think everybody's a different kind of pagan. I don't think everybody's the same.
That's pretty interesting.
The cool thing is you can be two different types of pagans at the same time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just like, but
This
as
is
far as like
crazy.
different types of pagans, like I feel like it could be limitless. But
Yeah.
there's probably like a good, you know, if I had to guess, 25-ish ones that are like, you can like find like in a book that's been listed or
like
something
a
like that.
clear-cut path.
Clear-cut path
Yeah.
that's easy to see.
Mhm.
And that's a very low guessing number.
Yeah. And I feel like when you're first starting out, or when you're looking for a way to really deepen and broaden yourself, it's fun to go back to those, you know, well-worn paths to kind of start out on your journey, because I really do think that that's a great way to describe it, as a journey. And, you know, have this path that's kind of, you know, almost cut for you, blazed by other people that came before you. And, you know, all of a sudden you see this little offshoot over here, and you're like, I'm going to go explore this thing, and I'm going to go explore this thing, and oh, look at this cool thing over here. And I think that's one of the cool things about it, is that you don't have to limit yourself. You don't have to, you know, tell
I think
yourself
that's
no.
a really interesting difference between like paganism and like Christianity or
It's so
Islam or
different.
anything like
Yeah.
that, because even within Christianity, you have Christianity, but then you have like all the denominations. And like pagans, I feel like don't feel pressured to put themselves in boxes. Does that make sense? Because they can learn from each other, because they're
Exactly.
always open to new experiences.
Because even paganism, even as they're so open that they're like, you want to practice Christian beliefs? That's absolutely wonderful. That works for you. That's amazing. Just as long as you're not doing harm for people. The only thing that I found in like looking through reading thing is like, we just don't like how close-minded Christianity is, but we like a lot of their beliefs. And and that was just like, for me, I was like, dude, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, they like this shit that I've grown up with my whole entire life. But like, it's so nice to be able to be, selfish isn't the right word, but it's like self-serving in what you're trying to do, instead of being self-sacrificing.
empowering yourself
Yeah.
rather than subjugating yourself.
I
in
feel
a
like
way.
it's really a form of self-care, too.
Yeah. Oh
You
my
know?
god, self-care. So
Yeah.
important.
But
And,
speaking of so many types of witches,
You mean so many types of pagans? We're talking about types of witches today. So essentially, what I want to do is I want to tell you guys. Well, first off, how many types of witches do you think there are? This is obviously not every single type of witch, but there's like, what I'd like to say is, we're going to talk about overarching types of witches. And then we're going to go into subsets, essentially.
So are you asking us how many there are with subsets and
How many
types together?
Yeah, together. How many do you think there are?
Oh, that's a really, really high number.
I think it's a very high number. I think if I was being very conservative in my guess, like of what would be like listed out for people, I'd say like 25 to 35.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good guess.
Yeah.
I didn't actually count, so surprise, you win. I have no idea.
I am the winner.
Congratulations. So, I guess what we'll do is I'll read you guys some, and then you can kind of like guess from the names of them. We're gonna do like the overarching, like the, I guess archetype was a good way to explain that. Archetypes
The
of
big
witches. Yeah. And so essentially kind of like denominations, and then within the denominations there's the subsets. So there's two that I'm really interested in like telling you guys about. Cricket may know about them, but and then we'll talk about subsets, and you'll be like, oh wow, I've learned so much today. Thank you, Brittany.
Absolutely. And I think, if I can make one more point, I think that's one of my favorite things about paganism too, is that, and even, you know, as a witch myself and as a practicing witch, is that everybody has their own opinion and everybody's path is different from yours. So I feel like I would never call myself an expert because I feel that I'm never done growing and learning.
That's how I feel as an artist.
Yeah.
I'm always in progress. I'll never be fully 100% loaded.
I think it's important to think that way because there's so many things in life that you can never exhaust learning.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to be an expert. Yeah. And this is a lot of information.
Yes. Okay, so we're going to start with the overarching types. Now, I would like to mention that the first category of the first overarching type, typically people are one of these things, and then they're usually a couple of the second category. Okay. If that makes sense. Because it's like, a lot of people tend to like start with one type of witchcraft and then begin to go into other types of witchcraft. Yeah. But the first section is kind of like, it kind of delineates how you, I guess it would be like your first personality type. Like if you are super religious or not religious, it's kind of like letting you know where you
choose to practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
So, all right. So first is solitary witchcraft. Mm-hmm. And then secular and eclectic witchcrafts, alongside all these other types of like religious witchcraft. So solitary is obviously not with a coven. Yeah, so it's someone who prefers to work by themselves, prefers to like go on their journey by themselves. And then there's secular, which is obviously just not religious. They're not connected to a deity or anything like that. Would you say that if someone deifies Mother Earth, they would still be considered spiritual rather than secular?
It depends on how they are worshipping Mother Earth. Okay. Because it depends. Because when we're talking about Mother Earth, sometimes we can be talking about her as a specific goddess. Okay. Or we can be talking about just the physical
Earth itself.
Right.
So as a resource versus as a figure, sort of.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, if someone is doing work with Gaia, or if someone is just really fascinated by rocks and has this deep appreciation for the Earth, those are two very different things.
Right.
Whereas, like, the Gaia example she gave would be much more spiritual, and, like, the dealing with just I really like rocks. Yeah. Would be much more secular. Yeah. But still.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I really like rocks.
So there's two. I really like rocks too. They're very nice. So we have two different kinds of Satanist witches. So there's a Satanist witch, which would be more like the Church of Satan, which are secular.
Which as a whole, witchcraft doesn't really recognize that. Is that correct? From what I've been reading?
So this is very, very debated within the community.
Oh, shit.
Because most witches don't believe in Satan.
Well, okay, so the Church of Satan doesn't believe in Satan either. Mm-hmm. So that's the difference between this. So that's why I said there's two types of Satan witches. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the first kind is the Church of Satan witches, which they're more secular. So here, I'll read you. It says the atheistic witchcraft, which they call Levian Satanist witchcraft. It is worked with the idea that Satan is a concept rather than an actual being.
So it's kind of like you said, it's like calling yourself an atheist, but still wanting to work within.
Right. So they just belong. I guess they feel like they belong with the Church of Satan, which the Church of Satan doesn't believe that Satan is real. They just believe that he held up very humanist ideals, and he felt that humans deserved to be with kind of like on the tier of angels, and that's kind of how he fell. Yeah. And so then you have the theistic Satans, and surprisingly, it says witchcraft that is often centered around honoring and or working with Satan in spell work and prayer. So I guess they do believe in Satan as an actual being.
Yes.
So you were saying other people don't like to acknowledge that.
There are a lot of people, especially within the Wiccan community, especially a few years ago, that were very anti-satanic. Because I think a lot of times when we hear about people who are, quote-unquote, worshiping Satan, in the media, it's portrayed as something as very negative. And
it's like you gonna go sacrifice some goats.
Yeah.
Right.
In my books that I've been reading, there's a really good passage where it talks about this. I'm listening to a book, kind of reading, but I listened to it recently, and it's like really good. I'll bring that in for a future podcast.
Oh my
so
God,
I
yeah.
can like
Let's
show
do it.
that, because it's beautifully written. I don't want to try to do it now and
No,
screw it
yeah,
up,
no.
because it's just needs to be read in the way that it was presented in the book.
Gotcha.
But it's absolutely beautiful. But continue what you're saying. I apologize.
No, you're
I
good.
also wanted to say, like, with the concepts that I'm bringing in, you know, like, I'm very new at studying. So this is
Very new.
We're learning with you.
We're all learning.
while we're doing a podcast. As we already said, no experts here.
No
Yeah.
experts here.
I mean, I feel like that's really the cool thing, is that we have people on every stage of learning about it,
Yeah.
and different viewpoints from and different experiences. So even though, you know, we're all women, we all have very different, you know, focal points and lenses that we're looking at these things through.
Exactly.
So I think that makes for really interesting opinions and discussions.
I would say if people want to worship Satan, I don't give a fuck.
So
They do it.
Not hurting anyone or anything.
yeah.
Or anything. What about eating? Can eating be a witchcraft? Please say yes, because I'm a food witch.
Girl,
I was
Not a
having
kitchen witch. I'd prefer to not have to make the food. I'd rather just consume it.
I totally had an experience last night. I had some people over, smoked some stuff, and my friend made this amazing cake. And it was like I've been eating healthier, and I had this cake, and I was
then you
sitting
had
here
the
eating
cake.
it, and I had a moment where I was like, I don't have to feel guilty for this, because this is my life, and I am enjoying this. And if it wasn't meant to be enjoyed, my friend would not have been able to create this cake. And so it was like a
There you go.
celebration, and I was like, I don't think I've ever celebrated with food like that before, and it was really cool.
That's
so
awesome.
I believe yes.
Yeah, very cool. Definitely. And there are even certain Ayurvedic practices from different parts of the world where food is considered medicine.
Yeah.
So, like when we journey to Asia, we talk about different types of doshas, which are quote unquote body types that each person falls into. And one of the ways that we bring our doshas back into balance and even balance our chakras, and chakras are energy centers within the body, is that we eat certain foods that correspond with each one.
to eat cake. I just want to eat cake.
I was like,
That's just
I
good for
understand
your
why we
soul.
give food. I understand why we give food to Buddhists. That's what I was thinking when I was eating this cake. I was like, I would want some cake. This thing is perfect.
When you have a good meal, that is absolutely 100% a spiritual experience.
Oh my god, yeah. Okay, so then talking about more spiritual types of witches. So we talked about the theistic and the atheistic type of satanic witches. So then there's a hereditary or blood witch. And that is a person that includes oneself in the practice of witchcraft, having been born into a family of witches. So their parents, or maybe one of their parents, is a witch, and they have chosen to follow the tradition of their mother or father.
Like Harry Potter.
Yeah. It's often like honoring old ways of magic, and it's knowledge and practice that has been passed down. So maybe they gather and inherit a lot of spell books, books of shadows, grimoires, things like that.
I feel like a lot of times when we talk about these hereditary types, I think we all want to be, find out we're one of the chosen ones and, go live in this great big Victorian house in San Francisco with the beautiful bound leather book and find out that we're, the power of three.
Yeah.
But...
Hashtag charmed.
I feel like a lot of times when we talk about these hereditary witches, I feel that we're more often talking about more like folk traditions.
Yeah.
So, things that, your grandmother would tell you, like, you better put your purse in the front seat, or you better push that chair in, because otherwise the haint's going to come in and sit in your chair in the living room.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's one of the...
You know what is one thing that I've always heard around here? And I've never heard it before.
What is that?
Don't put your purse on the floor.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
Why?
Germs.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't think about it in a sanitary
Getting dirty,
ways.
getting germs. And also,
Well,
like,
a
as
lot of women would tell me don't do that because it was like it wasn't just like a sanitary thing. They were doing it like as if it was going to bring me misfortune.
Well, like
it's
I feel
easier
like
to
in a
steal,
way it
too.
could. It can bring misfortune, and if like you get sick germs on your purse, it's going to bring you misfortune. You know,
That's true.
It's just like it's you're not
or it's
stewardshiping
it's also
your
more
things well.
more likely that things would fall out and things like that too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But you know, there are certain like folk traditions and things like that, and I feel like that's where, you know, when we talk about these hereditary witches, I feel like a lot of times it's we all expect to be, you know, like inducted into this Aleister Crowley like tradition, and it's just
to the golden dawn.
and it's not really that way. A lot of times it's, you know, your grandmother having an aloe plant outside and you know, cutting off
My
a piece
mom
of it and
being
putting
like,
it on your skin.
I will bring you another plant, and I'm like,
Yeah.
thanks, Mom.
Your mom is like has so many plants. She's
She's a green witch.
She's one day I will inherit them, and then I'll be like, "Oh, this is what it was.
This is what it
This is what hereditary witch
But
means."
really,
just
though, you
scattering
already have that appreciation
everyone's.
because, like, my family didn't grow up with like plants like that. You and even your brother,
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
definitely-
it's not just my mom. The
Yeah.
whole reason why we garden is my great grandmother.
and so that's definitely
And
something that you've
it's
already
like,
have
wow.
that.
I know, it's insane.
That's super
She used
cool.
to have so many plants in her backyard. It was like a jungle. Like, I'd pretend that it was a jungle and play in her backyard.
I'm
and
so
then
jealous.
the same for like my grandmother, her yard.
And
Like,
you already have so much knowledge just because that's what your family has done for so many years.
yeah.
That, like, me being like, I bought a succulent and I let it die. You know, like, that's my working with plants right now. You have that innate. You've grown up with it. It's been passed down. So in a way, you were kind of a hereditary green witch.
Yeah, essentially. And then, like, it's nice because, like, I remember when I would stay with my great-grandmother, because I'd stay with her in the summertime, and she would go out and water her plants every day. And now I do that, the same thing. And so it just reminds me of her a little bit. I'm like, oh, my great-grandmother used to do this, now I'm doing it. It's like an appreciation, and we were doing the same thing, but in different times. And I'm like, oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, and see,
So-
because I'm a spiritual person, I would consider that to be a spiritual experience for me. I would consider that to be
Kind of like a ritual or something.
yeah, a ritual, or you know, as a form of my, you know, religious practice.
Yeah.
But because you are a little bit more agnostic,
More secular.
Yeah,
Obviously.
more secular.
Yeah. You know, for you, it's just, you know, a way that you remember her.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
everybody, you know, interprets things a little bit differently.
Right, exactly.
So-
So that was cool. Okay, so then from there, talking about like traditions, there's the traditional witch. And this is a person who honors old and traditional ways of magic. This type of witch might be one to practice modern methods of magic, but they would also stick with traditional concepts and techniques.
Okay.
So what are more modern, what would you say are more modern versus more traditional?
Ooh, more
So, like,
modern.
traditional would be, like, slitting a goat's... I'm so bad. I should not be painting. I am not a good advocate for witches. I'm not the witch advocate, okay? I'm like the devil's...
hard.
I'm the true devil's advocate. That's what I'm doing. I'm advocating for the devil. So anyways, witches would not slit goats' throats traditionally, but I feel like now...
Well, it depends on the practice.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I would say back in the day, and this is just me coming from like nothing, more modern things, which I just learned this from a woman that I was watching on YouTube. You have sacrificial daggers, right?
Mhm.
And knives. Now, there's two different kinds. You have one that you use for practical uses, like cutting plants or cutting food. Then you have a sacrificial, sort of like spiritual dagger that you actually cut things with spiritually. And I feel like back in the day, maybe not traditionally, but, you know, when they were able to, witches would actually cut things or do bloodletting or something like that rather than a spiritual sort of cutting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of that traditionally, you know, that would be a very good example of traditional magic, where you have these two different knives that you use for two different things. So one actually deals with things on the physical realm, and then the other deals with things on the metaphysical realm. So it's really about, like, you know, the athame, which is the one that would deal with, you know, things on the metaphysical realm, would be brain fart.
Are they usually like stones? And well, I've also seen that they're two different shapes as well. So I've seen
the
they're
one
two
that's
different.
Done for the physical realm is usually like a curved shape with a light handle, and then the athame is usually very sharp and pointed, has a black handle. The one that I use is actually like all solid metal, and it's like a hunting knife, but it's all black. So I mean, it works.
Fuck it up. Then you don't have to clean it because it's black. I'm just kidding. You should clean your knives. What is wrong with you? Why?
Because I'm not really cutting things with it.
Get dirty from stuff except dust.
Ooh, dust is bad on.
But if you use it, religiously, dust can't accumulate, right?
Oh, that's true. Well, you're moving it a lot. So that's fine.
But you're really just using it to conduct energy.
Yeah.
Almost like you would think like you would use a magic wand.
Right.
So you're not you're usually not actually physically touching or cutting anything.
Okay. Right.
But in more modern traditions, sometimes people get away from that. Mm-hmm. And people don't have specific, just tools and things like that they use. Because I started with that traditional basis, I still have my athame, my wand, and things. But I don't use them as much. For me, it's one of those things where it's like, I ain't got the time to be sitting down and setting up all this shit.
Yeah.
It can be very daunting for me. Like, I was thinking about, like, finally, it took me, like, 2 years to finally realize I didn't have to have a whole, like, toolbox of witch stuff to be able to make things work for me. Yeah. But, like, I think it's really cool that there's still like that path, but definitely time consuming if it's not like that's doesn't work for you right now. But like it's like
See, if I were a witch, I would be like all up in it because I'm all about like watering the plants every day. I am all about a ritual. I enjoy rituals. When I fold my laundry, I enjoy it because it's something that I just get to look back. It's weird.
I think it's very good. It's very like ceremonial.
It's very ceremonial for
me. Because we did a podcast on Brittany's old podcast.
Yes, I used to have a podcast called Random Podcast Generator. If you ever
want to learn more about my mental health journey, it's there. But I deal with like depression and PTSD a lot, and like it's only been like maybe a week since I've really started like my journey through things, and like already like even like you guys, why does depression make you not want to take care of yourself? Like but like being able to take my baths and wash my face and brush my teeth, it's like I see that as a ritual that's happy, that's preparing me to like end my night to go sleep nice so the next day I can get up. But like it was like a big huge like big cathedral door opened in my mind. It was like boom, this is why we do shit. And I was like whoa,
rituals, man, I fucking love them.
They're for me.
They're all for you.
There's lots of ways that you can incorporate witchcraft into that as well, and really bring, that sort of witch essence and also the spiritual essence, if you would like that, into that. Some of the coolest, spells and things that I've seen are things that people do on the fly, where it's just like, okay, I'm gonna put a couple drops of like rose essential oil in my shampoo, and I'm gonna do this love potion in the shower while I'm washing my hair, and it's just one of those things where, and that's the witch I tend to be more, because I think I've been in it for a long time, and I'm just like, I don't have time to be setting up for that.
But that's cool. Like it doesn't require that. We're like from like a more traditional religion that we're accustomed to in our Western culture, which is like Christianity. It's like you have to do all these things.
Yes, you are required to do these things, or you're not holy enough.
And if you don't, then you're not good enough. But with this, it's like, I'm gonna throw some shit in my shampoo, and now it is good because it makes me feel good, and I feel better now. And that's like what really matters.
Yep. So then, speaking of Christianity, there's Christian witches.
Yep.
And so witchcraft that is performed to honor or is performed in conjunction with the Christian God as the primary and only deity. And then from there, it has different forms of spiritual. So we talked about the Satan, and we talked about the atheist Satan, or Lavellan is what they call it. And then the theistic Satan. And then hereditary, traditional, Christian. And then there's Hellenic. which is following Greek ideals.
Yep.
Now, what is Hecate? Is she Greek, or is she Roman, or is she Celtic?
So if we're speaking of the goddess Hecate, she is originally from, I want to say, Sumeria, and then she crossed the Mediterranean and ended up in Greece.
Okay. But they obviously call her something else because everyone likes to say something else.
No.
No?
So they actually call her Hecate in Greece.
Really?
And actually, over in Rome, her name is Trivia.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
There's a whole board game called Trivial Pursuit.
Yep.
She is worshipped.
So Hecate is really cool. She's sort of the goddess of witches, from this ancient Greek sort of perspective. She's quoted. She's in a few of these quotes. She's the one who helped Persephone make it through that transition into the underworld. She, was helping her mother, Demeter, look for her. She is this holder of knowledge, of, this torch barrier, this carrier of wisdom and light.
So she's kind of like a person that leads the way.
Yes.
That guides you. She's very much like a guiding force.
She's what you would consider the crone part of a triple goddess, right? More so?
Not so much. A lot of people...
Just from, the wisdom and stuff. And I don't know, just from, my reading, I think it mentioned that she was associated more.
So when you're... So Wendy just mentioned a triple goddess, which is Mother, Maiden, Crone, correct?
Yes.
So what is an actual triple goddess? Can Hecate be a triple goddess?
She is a triple goddess, but a lot of people conflate her with the more modern meaning of a triple goddess, which comes from the Celtic interpretation of it, which is Mother, Maiden, Crone.
Okay.
Now, Hecate is pictured often as having 3 faces.
Okay.
So she is a triple goddess, but she does not embody the Mother, Maiden, Crone aspect of the triple goddess. And I think it depends on the depiction of her. Sometimes her other heads are animal heads. Sometimes they are faces. It really just depends on the time period and where you're looking at it from. Because just in ancient Greece, things vary a lot.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that
There's been a lot of time, too.
Yeah, there's been a lot of time. And Roman people are crazy.
And everybody didn't have the internet before, so they had to come up with
I know,
themselves.
right? Isn't it crazy? They were like, well, I guess I'm just going to call her Hecate. And then they had babies, and they were like, I really like Hecate. I'm going to call him Katie. I'm gonna name him Katie. Okay, so that's really interesting. So there's the triple goddess, but there's a more traditional meaning for triple goddess, and then the more modern meaning is Mother, Maiden, Crone.
Yes,
and that's just like the phases of
phases of life, and that comes a lot from traditional Wicca.
Okay.
So we see that a lot there, and then we do see that in some Celtic traditions as well, I believe.
So after Hellenic types of witches, there's Celtic witches, and that's a magical practice that is based in Celtic culture. It says, including its mythology, deities, old ways, and occasionally language or symbols. May also describe those who only worship Celtic gods. So, for Celtic, it's interesting because I always think of different places calling themselves different things. So rather than witches, I've always imagined, and this is probably very wrong of me, I've always thought of them as druids or druidic shamans.
Okay.
But I guess that's only based on their practice, what they practice.
Yes,
rather than their beliefs.
You would see a lot of that within Celtic witchcraft.
Okay.
So a lot of times when we look into more of the mainstream types of, these branches of witches or even Wiccans, a lot of times Wiccans will have their own paths too.
Right.
So there are different sects of Wicca.
Right.
So we have Dianic, where they worship
Diana
from Greek
She's
mythology.
Fucking dope.
Yeah. And depending...
What is her Greek name? Her Roman name is Diana. Her Greek name is...
no,
Athena?
That's...
is it Athena?
No. Diana is the Roman one. Greek is Artemis.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
Yes, because...
Artemis and Apollo.
Yeah.
So, depending on the tradition or the people that you may or may not be working with.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that fluctuates throughout your life too, depending on your situation. But sometimes there are women who will not allow men into the circle to practice with them at all.
Wow.
And some even go as far as to say that a man's shadow cannot cross the altar at any time. Yeah, there are some people out there who are very purist about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is not necessarily the case with every Dianic Wiccan that's out there,
mm-hmm.
but sometimes people do go to an extreme of that way.
Mm-hmm. I feel like
that seems very not balanced.
Well, what I was gonna say is, for me, seeing it from like a secular point of view, and they're like, "No man's shadow," like that sounds cool, but also I'm like, it's 2018. We're on a spectrum now. Like, there's not just men and women anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So no, and then like, since we somehow got into gender,
sorry.
the thing like reading and stuff is like, it's like we all have masculine and feminine qualities to ourselves, and that's where it's taking in. Like, you know, it's like the moon's depicted mostly like as lady,
mm-hmm.
the sun's a man.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a balance between those two entities in yourself.
The god and goddess.
Just because I am a woman and I'm feminine doesn't mean that I do not have masculine qualities, and vice versa.
Right.
So it's a balance. That's why I was like,
little
lady buddy cross. That seems out of balance.
It does.
And I definitely feel that too. And I feel in my own personal, beliefs, I believe that gender is a performance.
Right.
So it's, it's what's that RuPaul quote? We're all born naked and the rest is drag.
Yeah.
Like, literally, everything you do is you are in
mm-hmm.
control of your persona. You are in control of how you present to the world.
Exactly.
Even if you don't feel like you're in control, because I feel like many people, everyone doesn't have the ability to think super critically and realize that they have these different abilities inside themselves. Mm-hmm. But it's a role that they have been assigned, that they have just taken and gone with.
Mm-hmm.
They don't realize there's anything else.
Right.
And but yeah, I believe it's all, I like that quote. I never heard that. It's all just drag.
Yeah.
You need to do whatever you want.
Yep.
So.
I love RuPaul. I'm so ready for All Stars 4. Oh my God.
So yeah, I was just
RuPaul.
Thinking that hashtag RuPaul. It's pretty great. It's just like for me, just coming from like a very modernist view, it's just like, okay, well, where do non-binary people fit into that Dianic
mm-hmm.
sort of thing? And so it's just interesting to hear that from you.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the main reasons that, a lot of people sort of ventured away from Wicca to begin with. And when we talk about the different Wiccan sects, we're actually talking about, like, there's different, like, traditions, like the Gardnerian tradition, which is done by Gerald Gardner, pardon me. And then there's another one who was that was done by a man named Alexander, that sort of, he disagreed with the way that Gardner did a few of his things. Mm-hmm. He was part of Gardner's coven, and mm-hmm. they sort of butt heads and split ways, and mm-hmm. he created his own tradition. So, and I can't remember exactly what they butted heads about. It might have been something about gender politics, or even it might have been about like the inclusion of people who were attracted to the same sex.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not sure exactly what that was there, but both of those issues are still very highly debated, I think, everywhere, even within the pagan community. Sure. And that's one of the reasons I think that people are starting to walk away from Wicca a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the texts, they were written almost 100 years ago.
They were written
50
by
years
people.
ago. Yeah.
They're written by people. And just like if you're thinking about the Bible or whatever, they were written by people, and there were politics and situations in their society at that time that are going to influence their writings and their beliefs.
Yeah.
And everything is evolving and changing.
For sure.
Yeah.
So then the last one in this whole section is science.
Yeah!
A form of magic in which both metaphysical ideas and scientific facts or theories are mixed in together by the individual practitioner.
That's me.
That would be you. You science, bitch.
I very much am. I love
I was trying to make a Breaking Bad quote there. I've never seen the show, so
science, bitch.
Don't tell me.
Oh my God. I don't know if anybody watches Better Call Saul, but they're
Oh my God, it's such a good show. I've never seen Breaking Bad, though.
What?
It's because it's very boring. Okay, I shouldn't say I've never seen
It takes a while to get into.
Yeah. I haven't seen Breaking Bad either. I started to watch it, and I can't get addicted to another TV show right now.
Also, it's very boring. I watched
It takes a while.
It takes a while. It has
episode, and I was like, I watched too much shit with white men. I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry,
do
white
the
men.
Fly
I love
episode.
you. It's just like I'm also done.
We want a little bit more diversity. Yeah, more representation.
That's all I'm asking.
But don't forget about the really awesome Eclectic Witch.
Oh shit!
Yes.
You're right. The Eclectic Witch was at the top. I apologize. That's
Which
an individual.
also,
yes, and so you can be multiple ones, obviously. An individual's practice that has bits and pieces pulled from different magical and/or spiritual practices, respectfully.
Yeah.
So
Electric witches, they do what they want.
Yeah,
that's right.
So I wanna make a delineation here. Later on, we're gonna talk about chaos witches. Ooh, it's not chaos magic, but it's cool. But eclectic witches are pulling bits and pieces. That's fine. Eclectic witches are from like the spiritual side, whereas chaos witches are from more the practical side.
Okay.
So chaos magic is when a person can pick up one type of witchcraft for just one particular use and then drop it immediately and go to something else that's very different. And they find energy within the chaos and randomness of their crafts.
Okay.
So that's why they're called chaos witches.
That's very interesting.
Right? Yeah.
That's really cool. I was not
really
familiar
cool.
with that. You taught me something.
You learned today.
Yeah, I did. Thank you.
Today. So,
but yeah, I really like learning about all of these different little teeny tiny sections of the ways that people practice, because I feel like it's because paganism is such a fluid thing, it doesn't stay the same. You know, I feel like a lot of people grow and change who they are as a witch over time. So I feel like, you know, you may start off working with a lot of Celtic deities and maybe later you move more into the sciences. Or, you know, maybe vice versa. Or maybe, you know, you start off as something very agnostic and then you have an experience and then, you know, you start working with one particular god or goddess. And I feel like it's one of those things where I feel like we have more in common than we do not in common.
Right.
You know, so there are more things that bring us together. And I think that that's really what makes it so interesting, is that even though we're all technically witches, we're diverse, but we're all the same.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's really cool, and it's the
feelings that are similar.
Yeah.
It's how it makes you feel, rather than what you're experiencing.
Exactly.
It's the feelings. I like that. Okay, so the types of witches, all the definitions are very basic. It's just a basic description. It's literally going to be like 5 words.
Okay.
So it's a basic description of each type of witchcraft or magic. Each individual witch might be a certain type, but define it differently, as their practice may be different from the next witch. Oh, we just talked about that.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's so exciting. So green. Okay, let me tell you guys a story. People have been calling me a hedge witch for longer than you may think. Like prior to me actually doing tarot readings and shit like that. Because I grow plants and people think that makes me a hedge witch. Because I guess plants die easily under other people's care. I don't know.
Some people have a green thumb and some do not.
So, hedge witch is not the correct term for me. I'm a green witch.
Yes.
But
hedge witch is something completely different.
Yeah, but
it's
some
about
people,
the way you're using the plants.
Yeah, yes, and then it's also like, I don't know, I guess hedge witch is more divination and green witch is more like the growth and like the tending to it and like the use of the mothering, and then also like using them in everyday things like in food or in tea or in something like that, versus like, I imagine hedge witch is smoking a lot of pot and doing everything.
Yes, you would be correct.
Yes.
So a hedge witch would be someone who is able to journey or to cross the hedge, which is where they get the name, over into another plane of existence.
So it's like astral projection.
Or like a shamanic journey.
Okay.
Where you're able to access other
Do I
parts.
seem like I smoke a lot of pot?
No.
No.
Oh, thank you. Whatever.
Wendy and I, on the other hand.
So essentially we just answered what green witches and head witches are.
Yes.
The difference between, well, they both deal with plants, but green witches from what it says here, it says utilizing greenery, plants, herbs, flowers, and herbal and natural magic, such as creating blends of different plants, or primarily herbs and spell work. And then hedge is a astral title, and it's a type of magic that is oriented around more spiritual work, astral travel, projection, lucid dreaming.
They're very similar. I feel like you could be a green and a hedge witch at the same time.
For sure.
You
could be all these things if you wanted to.
No, of course. I feel like it's a really good representation of that there is a difference in witchcraft between like the physical and a spiritual thing. It's practical and metaphysical.
Yeah.
I think that's like a beautiful
physical and metaphysical.
Best thing I've seen so far as an example.
And it's nice because it's got I feel like everything's duality. You know what I mean? Within witchcraft there's a craft, and then there's the spirit, there's male, female, there's, you know what I mean? So it's just balance. Like a very cool duality that's represented with everything, physical, metaphysical, so on. So then there's dream witches.
Yeah.
Dream witches. It's a possible variation of hedge witches, is what they say. Mindful and internal magical practice from interpreting dreams and engaging in lucid dreaming. Those who identify, I think is what they meant to say, as this may decode symbols and messages in a dream, similar to how one would use divination tools. So like you doing a tarot reading, they choose to dream and then kind of divine meaning from their own dreams.
Yes.
And then
also, one thing that I want to touch on, which I think is really interesting, because I've done some dream work myself. Working with Hecate, she does often work through dreams. So if I, petition her for guidance on something, she will oftentimes send me a dream where I sort of learn the answer through the dream, or if I don't understand it, then it's me going to my tarot cards and saying, okay, help me figure out this dream because I'm lost.
That makes sense. That's cool. And it's nice to have like multiple ways to understand.
Bitch, I hear you, but I don't understand.
Girl, that's me all the time.
I get what you're saying, but could we understand a little bit
all more? The spirits that I work with are like, girl, get it together.
So from this point on, we're going to talk about a few different types of elemental witches. So there's obviously an elemental witchcraft, which deals with all elements, and they invoke the spirits of all elements like fire, air. There's usually 5, but they can be up to like 12 or 15. It's kind of crazy. So the first kind is a sea witch. Yeah. That's my favorite kind of witch, is a sea witch. Mermaids is...
I totally want to retire to some little cottage up in New England somewhere and like live out the rest of my days as some sea hag.
So it says, a type of magic derived from materials or abstract ideas involving the ocean or sea and so on. They can use different things, seashells and bones, seaweed, beach sand, driftwood, ocean water, etc. A sea witch might draw their energy from that of the sea and those elements. So they kind of involve all of those things in their spell work and whatnot. Yep. And then from there, there's storm and weather witches. Storm and weather witches are cool. I used to read a series of books about weather wardens, and they were fucking dope. Oh, it was cool. Cool. It was so cool.
One of my favorite spells that I've ever done, so I used to work at the Renaissance Festival a while ago, and I was actually a hair model, because I have very long hair. And I worked as a model out there with this guy, and he promised me, I'll be super, like great to work with, and I'll totally respect you and pay you this. And he went back on all of those things and totally screwed me over. And because I didn't have any of it in writing, there was really nothing that I could do about it. Right. So I went and I notified them and told them, keep an eye on him. I know you can't do anything for me, but keep an eye on him. Yeah. And from that, I actually took an old mason jar and covered the inside in googly eyes and wrote his name on a piece of paper and created a sigil in the back. And I did this, and a big old storm blew up. One of the wildest thunderstorms. And it was just this like electric crackling just energy, and it's just, it was absolutely wonderful. And it's just, I've got my black salt and my candle, and I'm like, fuck you, you're gonna get yours. And sure enough, that was his first year that he ever vended at that Renaissance Festival. Mm-hmm. He went through 5 more girls that said the exact same thing.
Oh, wow.
He was never invited back.
Wow.
And I think maybe I had a little bit to do with that.
Yeah.
So
maybe you're just peeling back the veil a little bit to let people know, hey, this guy's an asshole.
Yep. And that's exactly what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So that comes from a traditional kind of hoodoo like piece of magic that would be called a mirror box, where you would literally have a box that you would fill the inside with mirrors, and any negativity or anything bad that's being said towards you from that person would be sent back to them. So it's a protection thing. So I sort of modified it.
Wishing shit on him. Like, you just wanted people to know him for who he was.
Yeah.
Oh, bitch. That's a good idea.
I love it. And I told one of my friends about it. She works a lot with hoodoo, and she's like, I'm going to steal that.
That's hilarious.
That's one of my favorite things that I've done. So
yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. But storms are great for, like, pulling that energy in and, like,
and then also,
with it.
Storms don't just mean, like, thunderstorms. They mean snowstorms.
Yep.
They mean any sort of storm.
Tornadoes.
Dust storms.
Yep.
There's crazy dust storms that I learned about in Kansas. Why are you laughing at me?
Storms! I'm just thinking about my own mind and trying to think of different kind of storms. Because, like, most storms are precipitation storms. And so it was just really funny in my head. I wasn't laughing at you, I was laughing at my brain.
Aww. Were you thinking of cheeseburgers and meatballs falling from the sky? I was thinking about that because I always think about food.
Yeah.
I'm a food witch.
I want to do that.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we should stop there and make a part 2 of this.
Absolutely.
Ooh, okay.
So we'll do that probably. But we hope you enjoyed this thus far.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah,
we're like now, I wouldn't say like a halfway point. Well, we're kind of like halfway because there's like a whole, I'm reading from a page. All right, no one judge me. I don't know all this information.
Really amazing. It's like an amazing.
It's essentially a master list of all manners of witchery. Do you know about heathenry?
Yes.
Oh my god, it's so cool.
I have a couple of friends who are heathens.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll pick up with kitchen witches and cottage witches and things like that, and hearth witches, which are like a very
next week
kitchen witches
on the Nap Show.
Yeah, next week we'll just call it episode 3 instead of episode 2 part 2 because that would be silly.
Yeah.
Because then people will be like, then you've already fucked yourself.
It's episode 3, Types of Witches Part 2.
Oh, you're so smart. Look at you. But Cricket, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
If you don't mind, we'll just have you here forever. You can just stay here with us.
I'm cool with that.
Okay, cool. Right.
Well, we flow better.
We hope you guys enjoyed this part 1. Thank you so much. Say goodbye, ladies.
Goodbye.
# charmed life. Oh, goodbye.
Yes.
Goodbye.